Hi, I'm Terrell Turner, the host of the Business Talk Library, and today I have another special guest on. And I really want to talk about this business because this is something that is very important in every aspect of your business, is being able to get the right software solutions to help your business compete and run well. So I am excited to have Bryan Golkhajeh on to talk about his business Workload. Welcome to the show, Bryan.
Thanks for having me, Terrell. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, before we jump into Workload and the amazing solution that it is, tell us a little bit about your background before you started that business.
Yeah, I graduated from Indiana University, Bloomington, Indiana. So I grew up kind of in the Indianapolis, Indiana region, and I graduated with a degree in business administration with a minor in communications. But I was always drawn to technology and kind of startups. I was always kind of a rebel. I wasn't a great employee at like your traditional corporate large enterprise. I just didn't do well in those kinds of like structured environments. I needed more kind of creative freedom to explore and experiment. So I gravitated naturally towards the startup companies. And I went to a career fair at the Bloomington campus and I met up with this entrepreneur, his recruiter, actually. His name is Scott Jones, and he was kind of a big shot in the Indiana area, the kind of the Midwest. He invented the modern day voicemail. So at the time, this was in the early 2000s. This predated the iPhone. If you remember, you had to hold down one on your like Nokia phone, right? And it would call your voicemail and it would store it like in the cloud in the server. This guy, he invented that entire solution and sold it. The company was called like Converse. But he made a large fortune on that deal, and then he kind of dabbled in some venture capital in the Midwest. But he also had a startup called Cha Cha, and Cha Cha was kind of a text message search engine, so to speak, where you could text a phone number, a question, and someone would do the research on the computer and give you the answer back within, at the time, the character limit on a text was like 142 characters. So it would be a very succinct answer. It was a great service. It was kind of fun and friendly. People would use it to like do bar bets, like, okay, who won the 1986 World Series? And you would like text that to Cha Cha and it would settle the bet immediately, right? Some people used it for like homework help. Some people used it for directions. They had like turn by turn text directions they would send you. It was a very interesting service, and was excited to talk to the recruiter about it. I got an internship there, and I just caught the startup bug immediately, especially in kind of these high tech, groundbreaking environments. Loved it so much. Kind of graduated from being an intern to a full time employee, and then sort of hit a ceiling within that company and thought, okay, well, I really love what I'm doing and I love the startup environment. So how can I take this to the next level? I started entertaining the thought of moving out of Indianapolis to either San Francisco or New York City. And I settled on San Francisco and got a job in advertising for an advertising startup company, kind of in the ad tech platform space. Um, Same deal, as a small team. I was like employee number 25 or something like that there. That company got acquired, and then the company that acquired us got acquired. It became way too big, too large, too corporate for me, and I kind of was put into a box again, and I had to quit that job and decided to start my own company. I had enough capital and I felt like enough experience to go at it alone, assemble a little team, and that's kind of how Workload was born. There were a few failures in between quitting my job and Workload, but now I'm starting to get some success with Workload.
Awesome,
So
awesome.
that's kind of the backstory.
Now, what was that process like of really identifying, like, hey, what do you actually want it to do as a business? I mean, was because, tech has so many different options. I mean, there's so many applications or avenues within tech. Like, how did you kind of narrow it down to decide, like, hey, this was the niche I wanted to focus on?
Yeah. So I started with just my network that I had built out here in the Bay Area through my professional contacts, LinkedIn. Everyone that I know works in the advertising business. So I was like, well, the natural progression is to start my own advertising company, my own ad platform. And, the ad community is kind of tight, like a pack of thieves, so to speak. And so it's, if you work for one of the large companies, everyone wants to be your friend. But if you're not a part of one of those companies, you don't have a brand name behind you and you're at it alone, you're kind of viewed as an outsider at that point. And so it was difficult, and I thought it would be easy because of my, kind of my pedigree in the ad space. And it was really hard. It took about 4 months to realize that we weren't getting the traction that we wanted with what we were trying to build. And I went on a little vacation with my wife. And on that vacation, I decided that we were just going to pivot into something kind of completely different, but sort of parallel. Okay. Ad tech platforms are sort of predicated on this notion of automation. So automation drives a lot of the ads that people see when they're browsing the web or on an app, these banner ads or these video interstitial ads that pop up when you're trying to watch a video. People don't pay attention to those, but there's a very complex automation system that runs those ads that they try their best to kind of custom tailor the ad to the person. Or if they can't find an ad that you would likely respond to, then they have some kind of yield management algorithm that will serve the most, the highest paying ad, or the ad that has the largest budget capacity.
Gotcha.
So automation kind of drives that entire industry. And I thought, well, what drives automation? And that's like automation engineers. So how can I corral a bunch of automation engineers on one kind of platform, like a freelancing network of automation engineers, and then tap into clients and say, hey, I have this army of automation engineers they can connect different software platforms together using APIs. They're very efficient, they're very affordable, and stop doing manual work, right? When you can automate these things. And then also that becomes industry agnostic, to where I'm not just tied to the advertising industry anymore. I can service almost any large enterprise or small business. Everyone needs to automate their processes and stop doing manual work.
Gotcha.
So the year is 2020. We shouldn't be copy and pasting stuff into spreadsheets anymore.
No, when it comes down to, that where you see that there are some people in the industry who are still, doing things manually. So it's like, it's a little bit of a cultural shock for some people to adapt to it. Like, what's some of the response you usually get from customers when you kind of explain to them the benefits of, what Workload can do?
Yeah, the owner of the business or the management team of the enterprise company are gung-ho about automation. The whole idea, the concept is very appealing to them. It's the individual employees that feel a little bit threatened. They kind of give a hard time to us. They have a hard time letting go sometimes of the process because they've been directly involved in developing the process up until that point. And so what they don't realize is that in order for them to scale in their own career and level up, they have to get out of those manual day-to-day activities and think on a more strategic level. They have to be able to zoom out, and you can't do that if you're clicking around in spreadsheets, copying and pasting data, checking things, doing form data entry stuff that, like, why did you even go to college if that's what your job is going to consist of? You can literally train a 12-year-old to do this. That's probably the hardest part, is getting the people on the ground floor of the company to see the big picture.
Gotcha. And I think that becomes unfortunately, it becomes a typical thing, because even when I talk to people when they first come out of college and they start the first job and they're like, wow, this is so much lower than what I expected it to be. And when I started, like when I was working at General Electric, one of my roles as a finance leader was to help transition a business to make some of the processes more automated so people could stop doing the manual stuff and they can actually start working on the things that were going to add strategic value to the business. And even with that, it was still a little bit of a challenge for people to let go because they felt so comfortable with the manual that
Yeah.
it's like, but I'm going to give you something better, actually like something you want more than that. And it was always an interesting journey just to see people, I guess, having to have a lot of patience to see people navigate that journey.
Yeah, they're a little disincentivized, I think. So it's like the way that you have to present it to them has to be different, it seems, because if in their mind, they're trying to hang on to every process that they can. It comes down to a bit of like job security, where they think they're going to get automated out of a job. And that's just not the case. I haven't seen that yet at Workload, where we've actually like replaced an employee or an entire team, because you still need people to manage the automation and check the output, troubleshoot, and you need people to think. API calls can't think on their own. So yeah.
Gotcha. Now, with a solution like that, and like I say, when you're met with that kind of situation, I mean, it seems like you yourself as a leader of Workload have to have a very high EQ or just a very high sense of other people's concerns. And like, how did you develop the sensitivity to that, to, like I said, to be able to adjust the messaging so that people understand this is not a threat to you, this is a tool to help you?
Yeah, that's exactly right. Exactly what you just said is how I approach it. I try to meet with the actual team that sort of were replacing their process with automation, and I reinforce it to them that this is a result. This automation that your company is implementing is a result of success. So you've done a great job, and in order to continue on this path, you have to automate this. Otherwise, you're going to be drowning in this process, and your work life is going to be miserable. You're going to get overwhelmed. You're a person. Computers can do this job faster and with less error. So you'll be stress-free. Like, you'll be able to kick your feet up and relax, and then work on the next thing to go to the next level. And they like that. Most people respond well to that.
Okay. So now let's talk about a customer who has worked with Workload. Like they contacted you, the process or whatever work they needed done has been completed. What's some of the feedback you usually get, or the testimonies you get from customers at that stage?
The best feedback that we've received is that the time saved. So we have a few clients that are very particular, and they keep track of everything. They're very data driven. And so they will literally email me and say, Bryan, thank you so much. I'm so glad that we connected with your team. You've saved me, 15 hours a week.
Wow.
And there's roughly 270 something work days in a year. And if you add up 15 hours times 272, I mean, that's a very significant time savings. And if you think of the costs of like having an employee doing that work, and especially when it's a small team, if it's a small company, I know that the work that we did for them was invaluable. And at the price point that our team charges, I know they got a huge ROI on that. So to me, that's kind of the highest compliment, is when they can quantify how many hours it actually saved them per week. It's huge. So I just love to see the smile on their faces too, and when things go right and it works. It's kind of game changing for their company. And then I just kind of set a reminder to check back with them in 6 months to see where they're at in their business.
Awesome. And 15 hours is a lot. I mean, that's almost half of a normal or 40-hour work week. I mean, that is a huge improvement.
Yeah, when you're dealing with automations that have to do with logistics or accounting, that's where you really maximize the time savings. So anything that involves like shipping and invoicing and tracking shipping, like procurement items and all that, that's where you can save tons of time. That's a very broken manual process for many companies.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Now, where can people find you online, or where can they find you on social media if they want to do business with Workload?
Yeah, online, we're workload.co, workload just spelled the normal way. On Twitter, we're Workload Co, at Workload Co. And on Facebook, we're also at Workload Co. And LinkedIn, I know my name's crazy, but the good thing is there's only one of me. So easy to
No.
find once you can spell it.
Now, one of the questions that I like to ask before we wrap up is a question I ask every guest that comes on the show. I mean, when you think about, your journey from, where you came in the Midwest to where you are now with leading an awesome business like Workload, what are two things that you have learned in your journey that you think other entrepreneurs should learn and embrace as well?
I think the first thing, this is the two things go hand in hand. You can't have one without the other. The first one is you have to be crazy passionate about something, whether it's entrepreneurship in of itself, whether it's the project that you're working on, or the product that you're building. You have to love it because, and this is the second part, because things are going to get hard. And the only thing that's going to drive you through the brick wall is that you're passionate, you're crazy passionate about it, because this is hard work and normal people wouldn't do this. A normal person would not quit their comfort of their 9-to-5 job and try to go start a company, some unproven system, and just build it from, employee one to then trying to get, an army. It's craziness. It's madness. So without passion, you're never going to be resilient enough to keep going when things get hard. And I think that's the key right there. If you just have the passion, then the drive will come when it's necessary to get you through the dark days.
Awesome. Awesome. Well,
Yeah.
Bryan, thank you so much for coming on the show, for sharing your story, telling us a little bit more about Workload. We'll definitely have some links there so people can click on that, follow Workload, and do more business with Workload. So thanks for coming on the show.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, Terrell. This has been a pleasure. Anytime you need someone back, I'm more than happy to join.
Thanks for tuning in to the Business Talk Library. If you like what you heard and you want to hear more, be sure to click the subscribe button and follow us on all social media platforms as the Business Talk Library.